today, what I wanted to look at was Module 2, Perception, Personality, and Emotions. And again, all of this stuff is related to work, right? It's applied psychology as much as anything. You could think of this course as very much being applied psychology. And what we're doing in this particular unit is looking at these three things and how they relate to the work environment. So we're looking at perception. What exactly is it? Personality, how does it affect behavior, and how do we use it, particularly from a human resource point of view, for hiring people or managing people would be the secondary use to it. But it's very much a focus of a lot of hiring efforts. And can emotions help get in the way of dealing with others? So emotions come into it as well. And again, from the perspective of a practical application of it. So this is, there's my book. So this is right here. We're looking at this. This is Unit 2 in the course and Chapter 2 in the book. So here's perception. Here's a good little, I'll call the definition of perception in a graphic. Okay. These two guys are looking at this number on the ground, and one sees it as 9, the other one sees it as 6, and it depends on your viewpoint, right? So perception. Going back to our first unit where we talked about individual differences, perception is a classic example or a classic application of individual differences. Depending on where you sit, it's going to affect how you stand. So perception is a process by which individuals select, organize, and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. However, what we perceive can be substantially different from reality. And we often disagree about what's real. And you've probably, in your experience, have all seen these various, I'll call them perceptual graphics, okay? We got this one here on the left is a little ball bearing. And if you look at it, if you look at the ball bearing and you think, okay, I'm going to run that along that shelf now, I don't know about you, but my eyes go weird when I look at it. If you move the ball along in your mind, you will see the challenge that creates to your brain. Okay, it will cause your eyes to kind of look at it and say, is that up or down or up, depending on how you look at it. And the one on the right, the perception looks like two faces to some people, whereas other people would perceive it as a vase or some sort of a candle holder. And again, everything is in the eye of the beholder. It is very much different. So from a work point of view, that's interesting because it recognizes that people perceive things differently and that we have to be aware that just because you see it one way doesn't mean that someone else is seeing it exactly the same way. In terms of this, the operationalizing our perception, okay, in terms of how we operationalize it, we have to look at three basic components whenever we look at something. First of all, you are the perceiver. You're the one who's seeing whatever you're seeing. So you're called the perceiver. Whatever you're looking at is called the target. So you're looking at something. And in your mind, that's coming back to you as being, oh, I'm looking at, in my case here, I'm looking at a bottle of lens cleaner that I had for my glasses in the computer screen. Okay. Sometimes I might look at that differently because I might catch it out of the corner of my eye. It might look like something different, or I might think something is moving when it's not moving. And that really depends on the situation I find myself in. I give you an idea of how this idea of things moving or not moving. How many times have you sat in your car and the car next to you started to move? Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, that's pretty freaky.
It gives me a heart attack.
So you know the sensation. You feel as if you're moving. And you're saying, this is not right. Something's wrong. The car's in park. What am I doing? What's going on here? And that's what we mean by the situational context. It is the situation that you're in at the time is going to affect how you perceive things. And that's so true at work. You know, the situation that people find themselves in is going to affect the way that situation is perceived by people. And we have to recognize that in different situations, people are going to act different ways. In a very stressful situation, for example, they're going to become probably much more testing. In a more relaxed environment, probably not nearly as testing. So, you know, if people get upset at work, we have to ask ourselves, what was the situational context in which they got upset? Why did they get upset? Is it the right situation? Do you think that situation led itself to people getting upset? And in some cases, we might say, yeah, I can understand it. In other cases, we might just not have any idea why that person got upset. Now, we don't necessarily see the situational the context that everyone's in. You might have something on your mind that I might have no knowledge about. You might be sat there now thinking about your dog, and your dog has a sore paw, and you're feeling for your dog, and you know, these sorts of things. I don't realize that, and I'm wondering, well, what's the matter with her, right? So the perceiver will perceive things differently depending on a whole bunch of situational contexts. What kind of things out there that can cause that context to change? So if we look at that, we can think about a whole bunch of potential factors that either affect the situation, the perceiver, which in this case is you, or the target. So for example, if we look at the situation, the time of the day is going to have an impact. The time, the concept of time. You're in a hurry, you're not in a hurry. It's dark out, it's light out. It's early morning, you just woke up. It's late at night, you're tired. These sorts of things are going to have a big factor on the situation of how you perceive things. I got to tell you a hard story about me. I fell asleep one night on the couch. Okay, it never happens, sure. Anyway, I fell asleep one night, and I woke up and I looked and I saw something move. I thought I saw something run across the floor, and I said, "My God, what is that?" When I came to realize this, I had a hoodie jacket on because I was cold. When I realized this was the string of the hoodie that went down over my face. It was nothing moving except the string. Again, perception. Based on me being sleepy and stunned and everything else, the time had a big impact on that. The work setting is going to have an impact on that. And I find that some workplaces, having worked at a lot of workplaces now, some workplaces lend themselves to not good locations to be. You know, if people are always snippy or not very helpful or sharp or too laid back or too lazy, that's going to affect your perception of things. And the social setting. The social setting is going to have a big impact. If you're pretty relaxed in a nice social setting with lots of friends, things aren't going to bug you as much as if you're there by yourself and you're stressed out, we'll say. So the situation has a big impact on how we perceive things. The perceiver, you, the things that are going on in your mind are going to have an effect. Your attitude towards certain things, and we'll look at that a little later on. I have an attitude, for example, that I say I don't like cats. Okay, I don't like cats. That's my attitude. I got an attitude against cats. No matter what the cat does, how cute the cat is, that attitude is going to affect my perception of the cat. Rightly or wrongly. My motives, what drives me, is going to have a... Sometimes people want to see things that don't necessarily exist because they're motivated to see things. I think you're a bad person. So I'm going to find and notice everything that you do that could slightly be perceived as bad. My motives are to confirm what I think, and that might be absolutely wrong. Or my motives might bound to be, I want to get myself ahead, so I'm looking at every opportunity to knock you down, right? So motivation plays into it. My interest, I have to admit that interest is one of the ones that I find very important for my perception. Some things I'm just not interested in. So for example, I'll go back to my TV watching on the couch. My wife really likes the Women's Network, or as I call it, the Chick Channel. She really likes those movies. I roll my eyes at them. So I don't really watch them. She watches them. My perception is I kind of, it glazes over me. It's the same story. I'm not really interested in. I don't really perceive them. I couldn't tell you. I could tell you the story because the stories are all the same, but I couldn't tell you what happened. I'm not paying that much attention to it, whereas she is. It just doesn't interest me. Now, if something interesting comes on TV, oh, I don't know, Gold Rush Alaska, she's not interested in it. So our different perceptions. I got to watch it after she goes to bed. My experience is going to have an impact on my perception. And that can help us, actually, experience. You're a driver, and you, I don't know, any of you got kids that's very old, but when your kids get their license, they don't have a lot of experience driving. For example, in icy conditions. And you have had enough experience driving to have made a few mistakes that, through the grace of God, you have survived. And you know that if you're driving on roads that could potentially be slippery, you're going to slow down. Your kids probably have not had that experience, so they don't perceive the risk as well as you do. So all you can do is preach it to them. And your expectations. I expect good things of you in this class. I expect you to get a good mark, fully expect it, and so my perception is affected by that. So those are the things that the perceiver run into. And those things, that from a perceiver's point of view, they could be good things or bad things. It can work both ways in both favors. in terms of what we want to take away, we're going to look at this assessment here in a few minutes. In terms of what we take away from it, once we get our results, we'll look at this and we'll say, well, there are the 5 factors: emotional stability, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness. And, why is it relevant is discussed there. So you could think about it from your own score. How is it relevant? And what does it affect? And, it's useful for you to think about, okay, what type of job do I want to do based on the results that I get? Is this the type of job, as jobs come up for you, is that the type of job that I want? Is it proper, for example, for me to bother with that job? Because if I go and bother with that job, I'm not suitable for that internally. I'm not going to be happy in the work. There's all kinds of terminology that comes out of the personality testing. And what I thought I'd do is I just kind of give you a handle on some of these terms, okay? So I've added these in. The first one is this terminology called core self-evaluation. And a core self-evaluation is, just as it says, it is a self-evaluation of you. So it's the degree to which an individual likes or dislikes himself or herself, whether a person sees himself as capable and effective, and whether a person feels in control of his or her environment or powerless over the environment. There's a bunch of assessments that are done in terms of job interviews to see if someone is capable of thinking that they manage their world or the world manages them. Employers tend to like people who are more focused on being able to manage the world, that type of I can change destiny if I choose to approach. We have another interesting term that you often see banished about with regards to personality is Machiavelliaism. And really, this comes out of this Greek philosophy. Machiavellianism is the degree to which individual is pragmatic, meaning realistic in terms of how things are in reality, maintains emotional distance, and believes that the ends can justify the means. We can think of someone who's a Machiavellian as a get-her-done type of person, right? Someone who rates high in terms of high Machiavellian. They're very focused on, I can do this. Here's what needs to be done. Lay it out. Steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's get it done. And then we'll say, we're all set. Whereas people who aren't so Machiavellian tend to say, I'm not sure what to do. I don't think I can. I don't know. Let someone show me the way. So Machiavellian leaders tend to be more higher rated on the Machiavellian, followers tend to be lower rated. Narcissism, Donald Trump. I had in mind to put his picture here, but I said, no, I won't. Donald Trump embodies this concept. And narcissism is really someone who thinks they're the center of attention, okay? Social media has been, especially Instagram, has been a key driver of narcissism in our society. People taking beauty shots of themselves and posting. What we're doing here is really focusing on ourselves. We like to present to the world an image of ourselves that may or may not be true. And most times in social media, it is somewhat distorted, okay? If someone is a narcissist, they tend to love themselves not love themselves in a positive sense, but very much, I'm the greatest thing out since sliced bread. I am so great. I am wonderful, aren't I? And, they have extravagant dreams and seem to consider himself the person of many talents. That's Donald all over the place. Narcissism describes a person who has a grandiose sense of self-importance, requires excessive admiration, and has a sense of entitlement and is arrogant. Okay, so just the definition of that is Donald Trump. And narcissism isn't so good for leadership because what it says is that the leader is the greatest person in the world and everyone else is less than them. And it doesn't take very long for the rest of everyone else to say, well, we're not going to follow you, buddy, because that type of approach that you're the only thing important is not necessarily important to us. in terms of personality types terminology as well, we've got this concept of self-monitoring, which refers to an individual's ability to adjust their behavior accordingly. You know, the good thing about this, here's what I've learned, having done this 30 years ago, and it was all foreign to me. What I did was I kind of stuck it in my head, and I think of my own senses here as I go along. And some of my not greatest moments, I'll call it, the stuff that's embarrassing to remember, you know, the stupid stuff you've done. And the question is, why did you do that stupid stuff? Well, you did that stupid stuff because you weren't busy self-monitoring. That is, were you adjusting your behavior to the situational factors, okay? And we really need to think all the time at work. Employers like self-monitoring. That is, someone who keeps their head on through everything, and it doesn't. You do have those negative. You do have those times when you could have done a lot better, and I'll be the first to admit there are times when I could have done a lot better. Risk taking. You know, certain people have certain higher degree of risk tolerance. Entrepreneurs, people who start their own businesses. So if you want someone in your workplace that's a real entrepreneur, meaning they will go get her done and come up with new ideas and very innovative and that sort of thing, they tend to have a higher tolerance for risk, okay? It might fail. Yeah, but we're going to do it anyway. And if it fails, we'll consider it a learning experience. That's what a risk taker does. And I don't mean risks to the point of people jumping off a cliff and hoping they can learn to fly. I'm talking about a calculated risk. That is, going out and making a business decision that may or may not work out because we don't have a crystal ball, but we made a decision regardless, okay? And we need people in our workplaces that are willing to take educated risks in order to at least take advantage of opportunities. And that is by definition being entrepreneurial at work or in your own enterprise. Another big one that you hear tell of, or big two that you hear tell of, is type A and type B personalities. You may have heard of this before. A type A personality is an individual who is fast, quick, and stressed. And let me tell you, you are a type A sometimes and a type B sometimes. So there's no such thing as you're always an A. It's just you have a preponderance to be one or the other. And I'm in the type A range. I try to be sometimes. So type A, fast, quick, and stressed, trying to get multiple things done at once, keeping it all up in the air. I think every mother has to be a type A personality, you know. You need to be able to have a lot of things on the go and keep them all up in the air. And type A's really like that. In fact, if they don't have that, they're not happy. Type B's are the opposite of that. They don't care. They're laid back, take it easy. And it drives type A's nuts because type A's are very focused on getting it done. Focus, get. And type B's are, let's get it done sometime, yeah. So different jobs really require different types of personalities, and not all jobs require type A and not all require type B. But if you recognize where you sit, that means you can say, I will do better in this job than that other job. And I've got type A personalities worked out a little bit here. Type A's tend to have the following characteristics: are always moving, walking, and eating rapidly, feel impatient with the rate at which most events take place, strive to think and do two or more things at once, and can't cope with too much leisure time. I can cope with leisure time pretty good, but the rest I got to say that I have trouble with. So, type A's, impatient, competitive, work obsessed, achievement oriented, aggressive, stressed. Now, some of those are positive, some of those are negative. Where to use it? Type B, on the other hand, exactly the opposite. Rarely harried by the desire to obtain wildly increasing number of things or participate in an endless growing series of events in an ever decreasing amount of time. So type B's tend to have the following characteristics. They never suffer from a sense of time urgency. That's the person in the checkout line up at Sobeys or Co-op who checks in their groceries really slow. The feel need to display or discuss either their achievements or accomplishments. They don't feel the need to display or discuss their achievements or accomplishments unless such exposure is demanded by someone. They play for fun and relaxation rather than exhibit superiority. You're not that competitive in sports, and can relax without guilt. So I think if you look at it, you're going to find that you'll probably end up seeing yourself in both camps to a certain degree. The question is, there's no such thing as pure A and pure B. Where do you fit somewhere in that? If those are the two extremes, where do you fit somewhere along the line? Final concept of emotions, and how do emotions, or where do emotions fit in terms of employability? Okay, and if we think, there are really 6 basic types of emotions. They're happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, or surprise. Now, emotions, we got to ask, well, what exactly are emotions? Well, they're intense feelings that are directed at someone or something. So, they're really intense, and that's interesting from an employment point of view too, because how intense is intense, and what impact does that have on someone's ability to do the job? Now, emotions are a little bit different than moods. Moods are feelings that are less intense than emotions and lack of context. So your mood is not necessarily affected by something that's going on outside. It's just, I'm in a bad mood this morning for no reason whatsoever. Now, it's tied with your emotions, but emotions tend to be longer. Your emotions tend to be more easily determined as an individual over a longer period of time. They're more intense and they're more consistent. Moods, people can have different moods flipping around. So emotions tend to be more of a fleeting thing. So emotions are reactions to a person. Seeing a friend at work may make you feel glad, or an event, dealing with a rude comment, make you feel angry. Moods, in contrast, are usually not directed at a person or an event. So if we look at emotions and moods and the effect of this, we look at the effect, defining a broad range of feelings that people experience. That's what we're looking at. Is why do people? So effect can be experienced in the form of emotions and moods. So emotions are caused by specific events. They're brief in duration. They're specific and numerous in nature. Many specific emotions such as anger, fear, sadness, happiness, disgust, surprise, usually accompanied by distinct facial expressions. We can certainly see someone's emotion in their face. They often wear it. And they tend to be action-oriented. The fight or flight emotion, for example. Just do you want to stand up and give it to them, or say, I'm leaving here, see you later. Moods are caused by any number of things. So they're general and unclear. They last longer than emotions, more general. So they tend to be positive or negative. Generally not indicated by distinct expressions. You can't really read it on someone's face. And they're more in our mind than anything else. So from a workplace point of view, emotions are actually critical to rational thinking. We have emotions built into us in order to preserve. It's again a natural human sensation to preserve life. Back in the days of cavemen, let's go back to our cave. If we saw something dangerous happening, we would want to run away from it because our life depended on it. So we must have the ability to experience these emotions to be rational. Because if we feel that way, we got to cognitively, as we talked about it earlier, from a perception point of view, we got to be able to see, why is this happening? What's different? What's the change? How do we get back to normal? So they provide important information on us to help understand the world. And that's the key thing. It all does with context. It gives us context. So the key to good decision making is to employ both thinking and feeling in our decisions. And the feeling end is the emotions. People who know their own emotions are often good at reading others' emotions and maybe more effective in their job. So if you're aware of your emotions, we don't deny the fact they exist, but if we can manage them, we're good at managing others. So the entire workplace can be affected by positive or negative workplace emotions. One recent study found that when leaders were in a positive mood, individual group members experienced better moods. And groups had a more positive tone. Groups whose leaders had a positive mood were also found to easier to coordinate. So it was easier to manage. So this positivity, and I think what's her name, Whalen? Jill, that's her name.
Yeah.
You know, when I watch her, she's always, if you watch these tea talks that she has, she's always talking about this same thing, right? It's along the same lines. It's a positive breeds positivity, and I give her that. And then again, she's very much focused on this concept. Out of this concept, and this is something that's really come up in the last 20 odd years, this idea of emotional intelligence, sometimes it's called EI, not to be confused with employment insurance. And just like we got this, you can go and calculate someone's intelligence, their IQ, their intelligence quotient, how smart they are. There's another measure that's come up called the EI measure, which is how stable they are, or how emotionally stable are they. And what we try to do in a workplace is to have people that are not only thinkers, but also feelers, and it's important. And normally, this is, as I said to you, you talk about difference between the sexes. Women tend to have a higher emotional intelligence level than men. That's just the nature of the beast. So emotional intelligence is a person's ability to be self-aware, to recognize one's own emotions, and when one is experiencing them, how to manage them, to detect emotions of others, and to manage emotions. So, from a manager's point of view, that's important. That's important because you're going to run into that whenever you're working with people. You're going to have this emotional roller coaster often when you're working with people, and you have to recognize people's emotions and be able to deal with them. So I've got this little quiz here too, as well, on the EQ, sometimes they're called EQ, emotional quotient quiz. So we're going to look at that next week. That's one of the ones that I want us to take a look at. So we'll be doing that. Next week too, we're also going to be looking at this, how Machiavellian are you? Now Machiavellian, that's a fancy old war horse, Machiavellian. And if you think of Donald Trump and you impose him on that, Trumpism and Machiavellianism is the same. Machiavellian was a warrior who won all his wars, very macho male, okay? And the question is, how macho male are you, even though you may not be male? So this is this type of analysis. And we're going to take a look too at how good are you from an emotional point of view at self-monitoring your emotions. So we're going to take a look at that as well. And the idea of a risk taker, that is a feeler versus an intuitive person, we're going to look at your level of risk. So next week, we're looking at some of these exercises here and just to kind of gauge where we sit on those various poles that we talked about with regards to personality, perception, and emotions.